hold to my hands. You look up, but your sky is crowded. Tiny screens drowning out the span. Every face glowing in the blue light. Every street buzzing sharp and loud. I float in the gravity of old fights. You laugh like it's just another cloud. From up there, you're a blue marble, bruised paper thin halo, hanging abused. I held my breath as you spun in the dark. How can you burn what you are? How can you burn what you are? Saw your eyes through a scratched window. Porcelain balanced on black. Every wall looked like dust and water. Every border just a nervous crack. Now I'm back and the ground feels fragile. Cracked cups stacked in a kitchen sink. You scream about lines on a map while your oceans crawl closer to the brink. From up there, you're a blue marble, bruised paper thin halo.
Check. Good morning, everybody.
I held my breath as you spun in the dark. How can you burn what you are? How can you burn what you Just your light through a visor reached the home in a sea of black. Up there we were one small fire. Down here you're just staring at the wax. Tell me, are you even listening? Why you fight over scraps of land? I've seen how easily you vanish. Just a silence where your color used to stand. From up there, you're a blue marble, bruised paper thin halo, hanging a goose. I held my breath as you spun in the dark. How can you burn what you are? How can you burn what you
I was telling a whole great story. I got censored by the man. You didn't need to hear any of that. Good morning and welcome to the show. Hey, hit the like and all that stuff that I supposedly said when I was talking. What I said was, I don't know why it took me a lot to wake up this morning. Honestly, I couldn't tell if it was the fact that I built a robot this weekend, which has no arms or legs. It's really just a talking head thing, but and it's adorable. but it would have a real hard time killing us all. Not that it could give it the old college try, but I don't think it could manage. I'm fairly sure without arms or legs, I could take it. You know what I mean? So, but I did that, and it's finished. I'm just doing some minor software tweaks on it this week, so I will unveil it on thank you. I'm glad you enjoy the Bela Fleck and the Flecktone shirt. Go see it if you have a chance. Great people, amazing musicians. So, and family friend, I should probably say that. Yeah, Bela's a family friend. Anyways, so but I had a hard time waking up this morning, not just building the robot or whatever. It might have been that Chip started walking across my chest thinking it was time for breakfast at 3:31 in the morning. How do you know it was 3:31, Hal? Because I have the kind of mind that says, this cat thinks it's morning. Did I oversleep? And I looked over and I went, no, I did not. No, as a matter of fact, I only went to bed about 3 hours ago. So this cat is insane. So I put my arm out like this, and I pushed, I kind of said, lay down, and then he curled up into a ball right here in my armpit, as he's wont to do. And he stayed there letting my arm go numb for about an hour, and then woke me up again. It was like a regular, but I think some people would be concerned, like, wow, I need to be spry and attentive on this fine Monday morning for my work that I need to do that requires a lot of cognitive skills and the ability to tell an elephant from a camel or bumpy horse, as I like to call it. And make me do all 10 questions and be seen as a genius. That shit. Some people would say that, but I got to tell you, there are days when the news is so dumb. I feel like if I was hitting the head with a 2x4, it would actually be an improvement. It's so wacky. Hi, chat room. Yes, I've never been called a stable genius, nor would I use that. Teach the robot to feed the cat. I think what you would do is you'd have a separate cat feeding robot. If we learned nothing from Doc Brown in the Back to the Future series, it's specifically that you'd have the little Rube Goldberg machine that ends up filling Einie's bowl with dog food, which if you leave it unattended for a few days, could get stinkalicious. I always think about how that opening scene in Back to the Future where he shows up at Doc Brown's place and he hadn't been there for a couple days, and there's just like wet dog food that's been being poured in there. What that room must have smelled like. Like, I doubt Doc Brown himself stank, but he also, I don't think everything was fairly musty and but then on top of that, the like cracked eggs and burnt toast and dog food. Just a thing. Cats make perfect alarm clocks, according to Bald Thanos. I would say an imperfect alarm clock, but certainly they'll get you up, especially if their nails aren't trimmed. Also, if I may, Bella, producer of the Stephanie Miller Show, is going to be our guest in the second hour. But for the first hour, it's just the two of us. We can make it if we try. There are today marks the day when we'd have I don't know what it's called, a Project Freedom or Project Freedom. We're gonna hashtag Freedom, DUMB. Project Freedom was announced today, sort of, and that is America is doing a humanitarian effort, according to Trump. That is, we're going to free the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah. And apparently that involves starting a war, forcing a blockade, having a blockade of our own against the other ships, and then I guess escorting ships through the previously already free areas of the place. So there you go. Just as dumb as you get, like that whole thing. All right. So that is the initiative aims to help ships stranded in the waterway following escalations. The Trump administration is seeking coalition partners to assist in the operation, who we do not need anyways. We're just testing them. Okay. Is seeking though Iran's military has warned against U.S. action and declared it retains security and control over the strait. Which, by the way, the reason Trump and his idiots are guessing that they can get away with this is because they think that there's no bite to that bark. The question is, will they claim that, well, there used to be and they could have done it, but we destroyed their Navy and everything, so now they can't do it? Or if they really never had that power, it was just always the the possibility of a threat that drove it. So there was a back and forth over the abortion pill this weekend. Mifepristone was available by telemed, could be prescribed through the mail, which is how a lot of people get their drugs these days. And the Trump administration and their friends in low places worked very hard to stop it. And then a judge, they managed to, and then a judge put a stay on it until the Supreme Court can hear it. So ultimately, the Amy Coney Barretts of the world will have to make, we'll have to get back in Trump's good graces, I guess, by siding with him on this, or not really with him, with his, with Paula White and his pseudo-religious handlers who use this as an issue. But I don't see that, I don't see how they legally can stop a single prescription drug for moral or religious reasons for going through the mail. And we'll see them keep trying, but that at least was put on hold this weekend. So it started and then stopped, and there you go. And then let's see. Oh, I guess the other big one was Rudy Giuliani's in the hospital. Now, no dancing on the graves before they hatch or something. I'm not relishing in anybody being in the hospital or being in pain or dying, but he had allegedly said that he was. I'm not a fan, but I allegedly he had an issue where he had a really bad cough or something like that. His voice was very hoarse. And then because he's 81 years old, he was hospitalized in critical but stable condition. Stable just means you're not crashing at that point. It doesn't mean good, especially when you're in critical but stable condition. So at 81 years old and clearly of ill health, this is one of those situations where expect Donald Trump to start talking about his own morbidity a lot going forward. He reacted to it this morning, or a day before this morning, something like that. Let's see if I can bring this up. Yeah, he called him a true warrior and the best mayor in the history of New York City by far. Now, why would Donald Trump think that? Well, because Donald Trump is aligned with the Russians, and Rudy Giuliani was a tool used by the Russian and Chinese mafia to broom out the Italians. They figured an Italian, or at least a guy with an Italian last name, would help them with the PR part of that. And so he broomed out the families and basically handed New York over to the Russians and the Chinese, which Donald Trump benefited from greatly. So no wonder they were thick as thieves. Let's see, he said, they cheated on elections, fabricated hundreds of stories, did anything possible to destroy our nation, and now look at Rudy. So sad. So, I mean, it's bad enough that the they is always trying to kill Trump, and it's always another they, and it will always be another they. But now they apparently made him have pneumonia. Yeah. And then we'll jump in on this as well. Boink. Okay, get out of here. Opening this part up. There are reports that that one of our naval ships was hit with a missile in the Strait of Hormuz. The Navy is currently denying it, but who can say? According to it, the U.S. had denied a report by Iranian media that the country had struck an American naval vessel with missiles. Brent crude jumped 5% to over $113 a barrel, and stocks fell after Fars reported a strike on a U.S. frigate near the Gulf of Oman port of Jask, following ignored warnings from the Islamic Republic's Navy, which of course doesn't exist, and yet still can carry out strikes. All right. After Fars reported a strike on the U.S. frigate near the Gulf of Oman, port of Jask, the U.S. boat was forced to retreat and flee the area. Fars reported citing unnamed sources. Shortly before, Tasnim, another Iranian news agency, announced the government had redefined the control zone in the Strait of Hormuz and effectively set out maritime borders within which Tehran would regulate shipping traffic. And then, of course, Trump said the U.S. will help ships stranded in the Persian Gulf transit, describing it as a humanitarian gesture. The operation, dubbed Project Freedom, has set to be. And boy, you really want to spend that name on opening the Strait of Hormuz? Project Freedom? You'd want to keep that in the pocket for later, wouldn't you? For a much bigger. Never mind. Let's see. The ship movement is merely meant to free up people, companies, and countries that have done absolutely nothing wrong. They are victims of circumstance. If in any way the humanitarian process is interfered with, that interference will unfortunately have to be dealt with forcefully. Oh, by the way, may the 4th be with you. The plan has left shipping executives perplexed with few details provided by the president because there are none. It's just going to, like I said, some days the news, this opened up, make sure this goes to here. Wrong. Why is it on the wrong page? What are you doing? Hi, Discord. The page should be this one over here. I don't know why that is. It just is. Oh, my monitors must have switched. Secondary display. Yeah, there we go. Hey, it's all ball bearings nowadays. Yeah, 2 of my monitors flipped apparently in the night. The plan has left shipping executives perplexed with few details provided by the president. That's so strange. He said the U.S. forces will be attacked. And said U.S. forces would be attacked if they enter the Strait of Hormuz as the Iranians. An enhanced security area has been established by the U.S. to support transits, according to the Joint Maritime Information Center, a multinational body that analyzes security threats in the area. There were more reports of attacks on ships. A tanker reported being hit by projectiles roughly 80 miles north of the UAE port of Fujairah on Sunday. According to the UK Maritime Trade Operations, which provide security updates for the region, less than a day after a report of a bulk carrier being attacked by small boats. This was like a little pirate operation. Hard to tell if that was a sanctioned attack by the IRGC or just some dudes going, we're going to need a bigger boat. Now, why did this guy not play when I did? Oh, there you go. Great. We're in stupid town now. We're for real. Okay. Oil rose with Brent up 3.9% over the weekend, overnight, basically. And Trump suggested we sent them a 15-point plan, and they responded with a 10-point plan, and ours had 15 non-starters and theirs had 10 non-starters. So, yeah. Well, Iran is reviewing a response to its recent 14-point plan. They shaved one off, probably folded into one of the others as a subsection. And Trump suggested the proposal would not be enough to satisfy him. I don't know, like the way they normalize how this asshole talks. We might have to do something. We don't know. Could be something terrible, but we'll see. And hopefully not. But we don't want to do it, but we're going to do it anyways. Like, that's the current state of conversation about this horseshit. So, let me close this out. And then I need to open something else so I can show you something here. And thanks for the super chat, Baltanos, by the way. Hit the like, share the show. It's Housemarks Mornings, Mega Worldwide. Bella from the Stephanie Miller Show will be joining us in the second hour. And yeah, $5.69 for gas in Chicago. Well, and Trump's brain fade is so brutal right now that maggots are really flipping out. I think we've got to do this afternoon on the afternoon show, a little teaser. I will be doing the entire New York Times interview as best I can find it with Tucker Carlson, which did not disappoint. But one of the big things is that right about the time, Chunk and everybody over at TYT is on the defend Tucker bandwagon, full-throated defense of him. Like, any enemy of the Israeli government is a friend of mine, no matter what they want to do to Americans, immigrants, people of color, right? Throw all that in the bin. My projected hatred of the leadership of another government is way more important than all the other social aspects of my country, right? That's where TYT is with Tucker Carlson right now. And to that I say, no, I do not have to support or applaud this dipshit for having a broken clock moment. It's ridiculous. But what he does do very well, credit where credit is due, is lie blatantly and often. And wow, gas is $6.75 in your area. And that will take a while to come down, by the way. As much as Trump says it's going to stop immediately, he terminated the war on Friday, even though he said he didn't have to and it was unconstitutional and all that. He did it. He went ahead and did it. And under the radar, while still going out on the tarmac and places going, this is unconstitutional. I don't have to do this, right? If you'll recall, he repeatedly said it's, no president has ever had to do it, which is true. If you live, I guess, in 1951, every other, since, but I mean, the Iraq and Afghanistan. Well, all right. Anyways, point I'm trying to make is that, no, it's not unconstitutional. He's basically citing the sort of torture pushback idea of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars that the Bush White House was trying to get around until they had to go to the UN, get coalition partners together, go to Congress, the yellow cake stuff, which is exactly what that was all about. Donald Trump was telling everyone that he doesn't have to do this. This is unconstitutional and he's going to blow it off. And then in the dark of night, they filed a piece of paperwork under the War Powers Act because they knew it actually does have teeth and it does actually have an impact, and it will have a budgetary impact, especially if they're trying to pass the new budget, which is what Hegseth was in the office for, was in front of the committees rather, for last week. It meant that a lot of Republicans might not sign off on it as long as Trump, continues rolling out a brand new war while they all pretended that no new wars. I mean, blah, 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 blah. It's the Mondayest of Mondays in that regard. But here's a little Tucker talking to the New York Times, and it was the big gotcha of the weekend, and it was kind of adorable. If you didn't see it, we all saw on my show this guy either directly call Trump the Antichrist or allude to it multiple times, or that he's demonic and under a spell, or that he's demonic and casting spells, all that shit. And they ask him about him calling Trump the Antichrist.
You've been talking on your show about whether Trump is the Antichrist.
I have not said that.
On your show, the day after Easter, you noted he did not put his hand on the Bible during his swearing-in
Correct.
ceremony as president. You said, and I'm quoting, maybe he didn't put his hand on the Bible because he affirmatively rejects what's inside that book. And then on a recent show, you went further saying, here's a leader who's mocking the gods of his ancestors, mocking the God of gods, and exalting himself above them. Could this be the Antichrist?
I actually did not say, could this be the
It actually really did.
Antichrist?
We played this on my show.
Here's a leader who's mocking the gods of his ancestors,
mocking the God of gods and exalting himself above them. Could this be the Antichrist? Well, who knows? I don't know where that comes from, but I know that those words never left my lips because
They like, this is one of the dumbest. This is right up there with the Will Smith apology and the Ashton and Mila, sorry we wrote nice letters for Danny Masterson stuff. It's like, dude, say you were speaking hyperbolically and go, if you look at the greater context, I was playing around with the idea, like, make something up, but don't go, you fucking AI'd that to a New York Times reporter who just played the fucking clip from your channel. Holy shit. Good Lord. Like, the lamest.
not sure I fully understand what the Antichrist is. If there's just one, I actually tried to understand it.
I tried to understand it. No, you didn't. I'm just, again, this is the lamest just asking questions fallback kinda ever. Because that's always been his defense. I'm just asking questions, which he is not doing. I would like to say for the record, Tucker Carlson does not just ask questions in the same way that no one was ever arrested on Twitter for just asking questions about vaccines or shit like that. Nobody got busted or kicked off for just asking questions. They got busted or kicked off for pretending to be a doctor or selling ivermectin on Snapchat. Get the fuck out of here. So this is not just asking questions. What it is technically, what the activity he's technically engaged in, besides a rhetorical jerk off, is he allows for the inference therein, where he asks a question that is loaded, like a push poll. If you don't know what push poll is, it's when they call, like, they polling in a way that drives voting in one direction or another. Like, would you be supportive if you found out right now that Joe Biden murdered a person, right? And hoping that a good portion of the people who took that poll went, my God, Charles, Joe Biden killed someone. And to which the husband from across the hallway goes, how the fuck did he catch him? Maybe they had it coming. Anyways, so that he allows that inference to percolate in your own brain like the coward that he is. Yeah. So, yes, Ali Osher says Tucker is turning into Trump and not answering questions. Exactly. I'm just asking questions. I'm just.
I may have said some are asking that. I'm not weighing in on that because I don't understand it.
Okay, that's straight up Glenn Beck. Let me tell you, like, Glenn Beck's fallback is, look, I'm just a dumb guy. Jimmy Dore does this shit too. There's a bunch of these assholes who, when they get called out for something they said, they expect to be taken seriously. They are, like, vicious in their attacks on people all the time if that person disagrees with them or shows some sort of parallel ethic that they don't understand or don't participate in. They will viciously attack somebody who questions their authority on something. And then when they're called out because they've used that authority to directly lie, obfuscate, or I would argue, like, defame somebody, their backup is like, I'm just a fucking I'm just asking questions. I'm just a guy, I'm a pothead comedian, right? That's what Jimmy says. With Tucker, it's this, I don't even think I understand that concept. These are great, these are things we need to contemplate. Everyone else should be doing this contemplate. I mean, why am I the first person to bring it up? Yeah, you aren't. People have been writing about it for centuries and coming to the same conclusion, which is none of your fucking business about when the world ends. Get to being a good person, or and stop selling end times as a product. So, needless to say, that's sort of a standout example of just how lame this just asking questions thing out of Tucker Carlson is. But there are in a bunch of these. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of these, like, we see this. I guess the primary one I would give you is Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck's whole thing is, I don't understand anything, and of course I don't, and I'll be the first to tell you I don't know anything. Yes, as an excuse. I am so tired of this nonsense. And by the way, can I just say, I will commit right now, as if it wouldn't be obvious, to stand by what I say, or if what I said in the past was wrong, correct it when somebody shows me a clip and I misspoke, or to explain if there is context. And this is largely because I love the sound of my own voice, and people, gather round maggot flunkies. If you want to learn a thing or two, here's what you do when somebody confronts you with a clip of something that you said in the past that you either no longer believe, or you believe, quote, lacks context for how they're showing it. Give the context. If it's a matter of detail, you can say, I misspoke about the detail, but the idea I was speaking of was this, and go back to talking about the meaning of what you were talking about. That's easy to do. If the meaning itself is wrong or shown to be wrong, then, or because they took context out, explain the context. Go, I don't know. You can even say, that clip was so long ago, I don't remember the overall context. But what I can tell you about this particular topic is my belief about, or, why do I want to give these assholes ideas? But if I was caught with somebody going, you called the president the Antichrist, and then they played that clip, is this the Antichrist, and all that, I wouldn't go, I never said that. I would go, that was part of a bigger mental exercise of, does he fit the bill? That was coming up a lot online. And so I was going through all the reasons why people might believe this. And then I personally don't think so, but it was a thing people were talking about online. And I was just going through kind of that general conversation because it was happening at the time. And I was kind of kicking the tires on it. I personally, right now, don't believe he's the Antichrist. What you saw there, actually, and interestingly, I think that was him still allowing or implying directly that Trump could be the Antichrist. I'm not saying, I didn't say he was before, but I'm not saying he's not now. And John 58:19 says something that I think is very important. Agreed. Trump is too stupid to control the world as the Antichrist. That is clear. Yes, exactly. That's why I call him Timu Antichrist. There is no fucking way that Donald Trump is the Antichrist. The Antichrist would have to be better looking, at least. So this is, yeah. So the other thing is, the other thing he did was start questioning the how did they get the Charlie Kirk shooter? How did they catch this guy? And let me show you that little piece of it right here. Which again is this plausible deniability aspect of what Tucker talks about, based on ignorance.
I want to stay, though, with how some of this is playing out, because, as you mentioned, you were very close to Charlie Kirk before he was killed. And he started Turning Point USA, which is this very influential group among young people on the right. And you're now seeing some on the right who are questioning whether Israel had a hand in Charlie Kirk's murder. And I should say the theories that Israel was linked to Charlie's death were denied by Israel. There's been no proof of that at all. And crucially, this theory has been condemned by Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow. Do you still have a relationship with Turning Point USA?
Well, I have always loved Erica Kirk. I met her when she was dating Charlie and thought so much of her. I know a lot of people at Turning Point. I was the headliner for a bunch of different Turning Point events. I haven't been asked to do it this year. Don't know if I will be. Never said a word against Turning Point. I think it's been a really, I was their headliner for a bunch of years, so obviously I supported it. I would hate to see.
Also, by the way, you don't have to support an organization to headline a thing. As a matter of fact, you could try and you could actually do it because you're allegedly conservative and try to drive it more towards your field. You know what I mean? Your area of the ethics playground. You could go, I think our priority should be this. That's why you do it. That doesn't mean you think they're going the right direction now or any of that other stuff. It's just
get hijacked by its donors to become an oracle of neoconservatism.
an oracle of neoconservatism. I don't know what the fuck that means.
It could be pretty hard to do because its members are not for that. Young people are not for that. People of draft age are especially not for that.
I mean, when was the last time you spoke to Erica Kirk?
A couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
By text. So my concern, and this is not about Erica Kirk or Andrew Colvett or any of those people with whom I've never had a crossword and hope never to have a crossword. But my concern more broadly is about the investigation into Charlie's murder, which was short-circuited by the FBI.
Who runs the FBI right now? I mean, the guy who ran it before was also a Trump appointee, but who's the new guy? The FBI short-circuited. First of all, it's a state matter. It's a state trial. The guy who killed him, or allegedly killed him, did not cross state lines to do it.
And I'd like to know why. And I don't care to be screamed at for asking that question. It's a legitimate question. And
I'm just asking questions and people yell at you and they want to shut you down. And that's because people push back on fucking Twitter.
Know that. I know that for a bunch of reasons, but the public knows it because.
Oh, by the way, this is a Trump rhetorical trick that he uses with a slightly different flavor, but be on the lookout for this. Everybody knows this. Generally, I think all the press knows this. Everyone in, media knows this. Like, he does that a lot. Plants that seed in the mind that there are those who are saying this on my side that are saying it outwardly, but the people who are against it are saying it secretly know this is the truth. They have an agenda and they're trying to twist the narrative, or they're just lying to you for clicks, money, or because they belong to somebody. That's a regular thing. Trump does that on an interpersonal level with that, that better than anybody, to reporters or somebody else in the room. And it's a big one where he'll be standing there and if he's asked a question about something, then he's got to lie about it. He lays the lie at somebody else's feet so that the reporter is now in this, if they give a shit, is in this socially awkward situation where they're not just, directly talking to him as a liar. Now you're calling him a liar. Right? That's the mechanic. Yeah. Fortunately or unfortunately, right?
Joe Kent said it out loud and explained it. He's the head of the National Counterterrorism Center. He's an ODNI.
Not anymore.
And he was told by the FBI that he could not investigate it. And as a friend of Charlie's, I'm not going to be intimidated into.
Also, he's not an investigator. Also, it's a state matter. Also, the FBI is doing it. Just because the office, and again, I don't know what of this is true, but there's all sorts of reasons why the ODNI, who's largely focused on terrorism and work outside the country, has any business sticking their fucking fingers into a state murder charge. It's a shitty idea. Like, protocol happens for a reason. Oh, good Lord. Is that real, Andrea? Holy shit. Okay. We'll look at that in a moment. Well, why don't we just do it right now because of this dipshittery? We go back to here. Yowza. Oh, I see. Is that? Hold on. I'm going to make sure this audio's
all over me. I've taken a lot of wounds, I can tell you. More than I suspect any president ever.
right. Let's see. Trump, Jesus post. There's been this story About all right, that's the Jesus like one. I didn't see the one that you're talking about. I can't find it on his feed. Been looking. Okay, it's on Twitter. Someone sent it to me. I'm not okay. Gotcha. That I mean, it might be him resending it there on Shitter. I'd rather we confirm that before we try to jump on this. But what I will say is that Trump's brain turn, at that event in Florida was, I mean, on full display as like the way he was talking was insane. It was just that it was like he was doing the weave, but it was like with a time machine where he's talking right now and then he would go back to shit he said on the campaign and just kind of blurt it out in a paragraph chunk like a turd, and then you get through that chunk of dialogue and then go right back into some random aside about himself. Oof. Like particularly terrible. So, well, I'll check on that first. But yeah, he said his body was covered in scars because of what he's been through, which I have to say probably means he had surgery and they're hiding that. He also had 2 dental appointments in Florida that he went for. And they have a dentist at Walter Reed. They obviously have a dentist just for the president. Biden had a root canal done there, for what it's worth. But Trump went to the dentist twice this year, one in January and then one, I guess, last week. Right. And it just reeks of one of those things where he's just going to the dentist and they roll him down a hallway on a gurney. So this idea that he's got a bunch of scars. You ever wonder where I got all these scars? Yeah. My father. Right. So, yeah, scars like his poor ear. Well, like I said, they just made a giant gold statue that's outside of Doral and put it up at his property there, and it's very authentic. It's hollow, and there's nothing wrong with the ear. I want to grab that part there where yeah, let's look at this Project Freedom nonsense. Here it is. Yeah, someone put a 760 million short the last time Trump announced something like he did with the straight. And they keep doing that. Right. And so much of this is a back and forth. It's so here's Fox News talking about what the demand is from the 14 points. This is how Fox is selling the 14 days to slow the spread of this new.
And it included a list of demands: a withdrawal of U.S. troops, a lifting of the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports, lifting sanctions, releasing frozen assets, an end to the war between Israel and the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah in Lebanon, and a new post-war order where Iran is in charge of the Strait of Hormuz, charging tolls and denying Israeli and U.S. ships from entering. The U.S. says Iranian control of the strait is completely unacceptable. The U.S. blockade of Iranian ports continues, choking Iran's economy. CENTCOM says 49 ships have been blocked, totaling $6 billion worth of oil.
All right, look at those points now. 30-day talks to end the war, whatever. Like they want 30 days of talks. Fine. What the fuck does that mean? They basically mean that they want the ceasefire to go on for 30 days total so that they can reload. And Trump, because they think that's all Trump is doing. That's it. The longer they can go without, exchanging fire with us, the more of a chance they have to reinforce positions and that kind of shit. That's all. Both are nuts. Again, I don't think I've ever felt this much camaraderie with the Iranian citizens in my life. Because both our countries are run by fucking maniacs. Demand of the U.S. withdraws troops from the Middle East. This is the same demand on 9/11. This is the same thing that Osama bin Laden was saying. This is the same thing they've been saying forever. So that's not a reality, especially if they bombed the Oman and people that are our allies in the region. The idea that we're going to take troops out of there is what does he think this is? Germany? The lifting of the U.S. blockade again won't happen because that's that's the leverage he thinks he has. So it's stupid to even ask for it until the talks are done, which means there'll be another the blockade will continue for 30 days. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but the date of the oil pumps are just going to explode. Let's see if we have let's see.
They just explode.
Right. That those things are just going to happen.
The sand was loaded up with blood.
Right. Their oil pumps are just going to explode. That was supposed to happen last weekend. Clearly did not. And so whether they've got weeks of storage capability or they're finding a workaround to get the oil out of the country through Pakistan is anybody's guess. But obviously, it's not destroying everything. And the other thing is they won't let them explode. They'll just set the output on fire. They'll just have flaming wells for a little while and put them out. So, yeah, Iran's inflation is between 200 and 300%. But, thank you, CSL. But, we're not far behind. Okay, so the lifting of sanctions, the release frozen assets part is the $6 billion in that Qatari bank that Biden allegedly gave them, but is still there and has never been used because it was not released. But also there's somewhere in the order of like $180 billion worth of assets frozen across the globe, and they want that or whatever. So the idea that Donald Trump is going to unfreeze that part of it, I was about to say is impossible, but quite frankly, if he thinks that's him making a deal, and like, do you think maggots would mind? Ultimately, like, or they would believe it, I think is the key. Do you think they would believe it, chat room? The end of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict, which again, the U.S. has actually no control over, according to Candace Owens, quite the opposite. And then new governing rules on the Strait of Hormuz, which mean they maintain control of it, which, again, none of the countries in that area would be okay with, and certainly not the U.S. We don't even have the right to do it. Let's think about what that means for new governing rules for the Strait of Hormuz. The United States does not have the power to hand over control of a strait to another country, especially the international waters part of it. How's that even happen? Well, the short answer is it does not. But even, can you imagine the arrogance of asking another country to give you power over an area that should be open internationally, and your idea that you could take it and keep it in perpetuity throughout the universe and all time is equally as ridiculous. Like, both groups are fucking insane. Witkoff, Jared, and Trump, and whoever the fuck they're talking to in Iran, they're all nuts. This is pathological. There is no version of reality where those things happen, especially the things that aren't under the control of Iran or the United States. Just friggin' goofy. It's so odd. Meanwhile, let's see if we have this from, boring. So I want to point out something. I want to show you a truth sinkhole post. And like I said, Bella from the Stephanie Miller Show will be joining us in the second hour. Countries, this is a Trump post from, I guess, last night or something, night before maybe. Countries from all over look at the density of this text, ladies and gentlemen. Countries from all over the world, almost all of which are not involved in the Middle East dispute going on so visibly and violently for all to see, have asked the United States if we could help free up their ships, which are locked up in the Strait of Hormuz, on something which they have absolutely nothing to do with. Which are locked up in the Strait of Hormuz on something which they have absolutely nothing to do with. Okay. They are merely neutral, innocent bystanders. For the good of Iran, the Middle East, and the United States, we have told these countries that we will guide their ships safely out of the restricted waterways. Waterways is capitalized, I'm not quite sure why. So that they can freely and ably get on with their business. Again, these are ships from areas of the world that are not in any way involved with that which is currently taking place in the Middle East. I have told my representatives to inform them that we will use best efforts to get their ships and crews safely out of the strait. In all cases, they said they will not be returning until the area becomes safe for navigation and everything else. So the idea is we're gonna help get these ships out of there, but they're not coming back until it's permanently secured. We're reading this through a gibberish filter. And it becomes safe for navigation and everything else. So the Strait of Hormuz not only has to be safe for passage, there's got to be safe sex, and there's somebody would be safe at second, and but just safe for everything else. This process, Project Freedom, will begin Monday morning, Middle East time. I am fully aware that my representatives are having very positive discussions with the country of Iran, and that these discussions could lead to something very positive for all. The ship movement is merely meant to free up people, companies, and countries that have done absolutely nothing wrong. They are victims of circumstance. Is that the piece of it? Yeah, he said they repeated that in another post. He shortened this and did a shorter post about victims of circumstance as well. This is a humanitarian gesture on behalf of the United States. Aren't we so lovely? We're so magnanimous. Middle Eastern countries, but in particular, the country of Iran. This is a humanitarian gesture on behalf of the United States, Middle Eastern countries, but in particular, the country of Iran. Sorry, we're doing a humanitarian gesture for Iran. Gibberish. Okay. I guess by them not firing on us while we do these things, that's them being humanitarian. Well, then why do we have a blockade? Anyways, all right. Many of these ships are running low on food and everything else necessary for large-scale crews to stay on board in a healthy and sanitary manner. Notice he didn't give a shit about cruise ships when they had COVID patients on them that were Americans. Remember that? He didn't want them coming ashore because it would fuck with his numbers. I guess he wanted them to just become floating morgues, like something that runs aground in an episode of Fear the Walking Dead. I think it would go a long way in showing goodwill, capitalized for no reason, on behalf of all those who have been fighting so strenuously over the last number of months. If in any way this humanitarian process is interfered with, that interference will unfortunately have to be dealt with forcefully. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I think it would go a long way in showing goodwill on behalf of all those who have been fighting so strenuously over the last number of months. Again, fucking gibberish. Really nuts. Loomer wrote this. I wouldn't rule it out. But anyways, so we're now getting edicts written on X. That just policy is just drafted and posted online. But the reason there are multiple reasons to bring this up other than it's bullshit, is that I think it was the Daily Beast that recently did a report on how much sleep Trump is losing. And I brought this up a bunch of times where they do this thing where they're talking about the guy never sleeps. He's like, he's got so much energy. He's like, everything he does, like he's going to live to be 200 because he's like a wind-up toy. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He can't be slowed down, and he posts 24 hours a day. Well, I pointed out a while back that is insane and unhealthy beyond measure. And the idea that he is somehow making that it's beneficial for this guy to be tweeting at all hours is terrible, especially at his age. But anyways, like it wouldn't matter if you were young and you slept that little. Yeah, you die from lack of sleep before lack of food. It's called psychosis. Well, that was, I think, the point that they were making about Trump's sleep, and I'll see if I can find it real quick. But the case that we're making is that it cooks your brain, and that people are increasingly worried, as they should be, that this is showing it's showing that his mental health is deteriorating and is not going to improve anytime soon. Where is it? I'll find it separately. Okay. Because he's been falling asleep during the day. We've seen this a bunch of times. But the reasoning, the thing about his sleep issue is not so much that he's sleeping during the day. That's expected when you're only getting 5 or 6 hours a night. But they went through and they looked at all of his truth bombing, and his trothing that he does on his site, and that gets carried over onto Twitter, and they're like, he's getting somewhere in the order of 5 to 6 hours a night, maybe. And some nights he posts in the middle. Now, here's what I would like to, I'd like to put a flag in this for a moment. Flag on the play. 2 minutes for lack of gripping. Let's be abundantly clear. A lot of his late night shittery is him. He posts a bunch of stuff, or puts it in this kitty, like stuff he likes or whatever. And then it loads into this like scheduler on his behalf, and it goes out later so that it can look like he's up all night. This is an illusion they are selling. Quite frankly, it's probably more likely that his executive time and all that kind of stuff, they're covering for how much he's actually sleeping, especially when they are maybe doping him to make sure he's sleeping, or putting melatonin in his IV or whatever they're doing, that they're covering for the fact that he's basically persona non grata, is in flagrante delicto and out cold for, 12 hours. That it isn't that he's staying up at all these hours and, oh my God, this man has so much energy. It's that they know he's losing his fucking mind. They're probably giving him something to sleep. And to make it look like he's awake all the time, and, to manipulate maggots into thinking he has this magical energy, they do the posting later. Because I got to tell you, Valium in the pudding. This is what so chat room, let me know what you think the potential is for, how they knock him out. Let's see. Well, thank you. Between you and Brian, it's more like than a cup of coffee. But these folks are ignorant, deserve no respect, or welcome back ever. I think you're talking about the Tucker Carlson stuff. I completely agree. So this is, I think it's a ruse. You know how like lately there's I think a bunch of these podcasts, like right wing, Joe Rogan light podcasts that have been going around. They're all talking about how Trump is, how Epstein maybe didn't kill himself. Maybe he was murdered. Have they finally come around to actually maybe he's still alive? And that seems to be the growing consensus. Well, who was there first? Now, granted, I don't have any insider knowledge, and I haven't been able to go in there and look at the air vent that was apparently in his cell that's big enough for a human to go through, and has a room on the other side of it that's big enough for you to stay for 3 days. I haven't been able to lay my own eyes on that, but I'm glad that it's driving the paranoia up on the right wing, because again, who was president, who was in charge of the DOJ, and who was in charge of the FBI when Epstein escaped in this theory? They repeatedly, said over the years they thought he was murdered. Now they're leaning towards the idea that he escaped. Okay. And one of the things I mentioned is that the whole argument about whether he killed himself or whether he was murdered is the best way to hide if he escaped, because there's so much controversy, and it's such a binary that false binary that you created. He either killed himself or he was murdered. Those back and forths eliminate the conversation that maybe he's still alive entirely, right? You've got two sides, both of them well known or whatever, in the podcast world or news, back and forth, arguing for one side or the other. But that means that the overwhelming argument that you will hear is between those two, and that argument can go on forever, and it has zero meaning. The guy's still gone in that regard, and how we act afterwards is the meaningful part of this. But it also means that no one is discussing the other option, right? By watching everybody go, he killed himself, he was murdered, back and forth. It eliminates the conversation that he could still be alive. Does that make sense? Okay. There's Bella. Hi there. So let me do this. There we go. I'll bring her in just a moment. But chat room, think about that for a second. That the conversation about whether Epstein killed himself or was murdered is a great way to obscure the conversation about maybe he didn't die at all, maybe he escaped, which how much would it cost you to escape a jail like that? I'm guessing less than $1 billion if the Russians were involved. So the point being is that is my current favorite conspiracy theory. I have no need for it to be true or not true. It's just, I find it way more interesting than the other ones, so I can play around with it. But now right-wing media is calling it as real. They're really buy this stuff. The other thing is also true, and I'll bring in Bella because I want to get her thoughts on this. Welcome to the show, Bella with a Z.
Hey.
Hi. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm glad. We had to reschedule a couple of times, so I'm glad you made it on here. So
I'm super excited to be here.
Yes. So one of my bugaboos, as John C. Reilly would say, is this idea that Donald Trump is somehow super healthy and awake all the time, and he only sleeps 5-6 hours a night, and you could tell because he's up tweeting and yelling shit at all hours. And we know that Dan Scavino and a couple other people, including Natalie Bay, whatever her name is, the human printer that walks around, with a little hand printer to print things out and hand them to him, who's also one of his social media things. She's a social media babe. She's blonde. She looks like she came straight out of one of his pageants. I think it's much more logical that both of them load a bunch of stuff at the end of the day, for him and go, we'll post these all night, sir. They'll think you're awake, and your enemies will think you never sleep. And so they post these, and that quite frankly, the opposite, especially right now, is happening. It's not that he's getting 5 hours a night, and that's why he's nuts and falling asleep. It's that he's getting 12 hours a night, and he's still falling asleep, and he's still losing his mind.
Yeah,
Thoughts, Bella?
Regardless, here's what I want people to remember. Especially living in Los Angeles, like we all know, the smallest influencers, the smallest celebrities, like the lowest of the low, C-list, D-list, still have like 5 or 6 people running their social media accounts and running their social media sites at all times. Do we really not think that Donald Trump, right now the most powerful man in America, and previously one of the most famous people on planet Earth, you think he hasn't had people monitoring his social media sites and running his social media before the campaign even happened, before 2016? I mean, hello, this has been a part of his schedule forever. So why are people assuming that all of a sudden it's him and he's the one that has access to his accounts? I don't doubt that he's contributing to the writing and contributing to the craziness behind his posts, but it's ignorant for people to assume that it's just him and that these aren't scheduled, these aren't planned out, that he's not following Nixon's madman theory. Like this is like the 2026 version of Nixon. This is we're history repeating itself. I mean, come on now.
Right. Well, and as someone I think who on occasion qualifies as higher than C-list, I've always run all my own social media because that's what I use it to interact with, and because I was never bullshitting. It's you definitely need one if you're trying to create an image or you're trying to like bamboozle people into thinking you're more together than you are or what have you. Right. So in this particular instance, he's been a liar for a long time. He didn't write Art of the Deal. There was a whole, there's a whole PR campaign. Look at the sales of that book
Of course.
based entirely on making people believe this is his philosophy that he actually follows, that he actually read it, any of that stuff. The same thing's true of The Apprentice. The dude had 6 bankruptcies. He's the last person you would want as a business mentor. He's never
100%.
had, I mean, if you want somebody like that, you need somebody who had a publicly traded company, who had to deal with, investors who might bug out, instead of, I can strong arm them because I already own the property, or I own it through, I've got loans they could never get because I'm backed by the Russians, which I think is largely a part of this. And so there's this, he's as a constant liar. It's like Bustamante and Kirikow, these 2 like CIA flunkies that have been around that are like on Trump's side. Kirikow's on Trump's side, and the other one's kind of, just selling that everyday spy guy. They'll tell you, once in the CIA, always in the CIA. And I'm like, well, then why am I believing your posts? Why would I believe if you're saying I used to be full of shit for a living? How do I know you're not still full of shit? It's a little silly, right? The same thing is true of Trump. Like, why would this change once he's in office? And
100%.
right. So the question, I guess, is, and do you see this as much as I do? And then I have, of course, the biggest question, Bella, which is, what story lately, for it's your first time on the show, and it's also, I like to get this from folks because we can never cover all the insanity that's going on. What story do you think is being missed currently? So gel on that for a second. But this idea, the illusion that he's up all night and that's why he's acting crazy, is that, well, a guy barely sleeps, could be, covering, covering cancer with a cut. That, you know what I mean? If somebody's got a big giant welt where they've got something that's killing them, if you cut it or you bruise it or color it to look like a bruise, you're like, that's just a flesh wound.
Oh yeah. No, he has dementia. I mean, we talk about this all the time on the Stephanie Miller show every single morning. Steffi always talks about her mother struggled with dementia. I've also, had friends' parents who struggle with dementia. It's so obvious. Every single symptom, the sleeping during the day, that's all of it is a symptom of dementia. And we're completely missing it. No media outlets are talking about this. No one has even considered it. And I understand there's a line that people don't want to cross, the media may not want to cross, in terms of diagnosing. That's been a problem in the last couple of years with WebMD, with ChatGPT, people self-diagnosing themselves with life-threatening diseases. So sure, whatever, I can kind of see that, but this is the president of the United States. We cannot not go there. We can't not cross those lines, or at least push.
And they had no problem doing it with Biden. Like, especially in those quarters.
Absolutely no problem. Sleepy Joe, I mean, come on. Like, Sleepy Trump now. I actually can't believe that this hasn't crossed over and that we've completely forgotten the plot in terms of, how critical we were of past presidents. Yet we're not doing that here. Why aren't we doing that here? Why aren't media outlets covering this? We talk about Jake Tapper all the time. Where is he now? It's just insane that this is something
but he doesn't write the book until after. He carries the water, and then he writes a book about how I shouldn't have carried the water. I've learned my lesson. And he'll do the exact same thing this time, I guess, in theory. The other thing is that they're not really afraid of Democrats because we're not, by and large, insane people that show up on your lawn with a gun. We just aren't. Whereas maggots, there's a bunch of these. There was I think that Florida Polk County sheriff who does the name and shame thing, busted an online influencer for trying to either I think it was just like busted trying to hire a prostitute or something like that. Anyways, this guy was a J6er who Trump pardoned, that kind of stuff.
Naturally.
Yeah, of course. But the issue, I think, with Trump's kind of crowd around him is that I think they've moved in, Susie Wiles, even Stephen Miller and that crowd, they have moved into, okay, we got to circle the wagons around this madness because he's clearly losing his mind and we're running out of things to blame it on. I honestly think they're planning overseas trips for him just to explain why he might be exhausted.
Oh, no, definitely. It's so obvious.
So there's where are we? Here we go. Let me bring this up. Yeah. So Trump's big problem right now is not us. It's not Democrats. It's not even the redistricting issue and that kind of stuff. It is that maggots are finally recognizing something is really wrong. And my question is for you, perhaps, is are they going to say the poor, like Alex Jones tried to do, which is the poor guy's got dementia. It's not his fault. People are whispering in his ear. He's being hypnotized. There's a spell put on him, which is what Tucker said. Whereas, or are they going to recognize he was always lying? We told you he was a liar, and he's doing it again.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, what sucks is that MAGA and Trump supporters they're in so deep that my big fear is that they're never going to be able to fully grasp the severity of the situation, and they're never going to be able to not find a reason why Trump is actually fine, why he's actually okay. He didn't mean it, XYZ, just in my experience interacting with these people, at least like in my hometown, like every single time something terrible happened, especially like 2016 to 2020, they would always excuse it with, oh, well, it's fine. Like, I'm still going to vote for him. He's better than a Democrat. He's better than a Democrat. And because that mentality has been ingrained within them because of Trump, because, nowadays we are so divided as a country that we cannot look at things, and specifically Republicans right now can't look at things rationally. They can't look at things in the big picture. They can't take the betterment and the well-being of our country into account. It would require something. I always say it would require something insane, but then you know what? Something insane does happen, and still the switch is happening slowly but surely. He always means it. He always means it, and for some reason they always find an excuse, or they find a reason to. We see it in street interviews all the time. I'm always scrolling social media, scrolling TikTok, and I'm seeing these street interviews of people saying, "Oh, well, yeah, he did do that, but it's okay. It's better than a Democrat."
Right. Well, there are two things happening sort of in parallel, and it's usually like, well, he's lying, but he's only lying so he can do the truth. So that it's like the lying for Jesus idea, like lie to get into office, and I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna have judges that are constitutionalists and call balls and strikes. I'm not gonna have just crony judges in there as a protection racket, and then hire exactly those people. So there's this lying on behalf of Jesus thing that they're like the rest of the electorate isn't for it. So he had to say that to get elected. The Machiavellian wink and a nod that they give. And the other one is that he's telling the truth, but other people are turning it into a lie, meaning he said what he really wanted to do on the campaign trail, and now someone has hypnotized him and is making him do the opposite. He couldn't possibly be this much of a liar to me. And this is a quote from one of these people who was on this Fox panel about affordability, and the Trump saying that this was a made up word by the Democrats. Well, honestly, what has been holding me back is I feel like the change that I was expecting from the president himself. I don't feel in my everyday life, which is concerning to me. I still feel obviously that prices are very, very, very high. If you're going to the grocery store, or just in general, because inflation still exists. Unfortunately, now we have higher gas prices, which really hurt, everyday people in their pocket. And I voted my entire life. And the frustration right now is it's just unbelievable, because what really changes? I just feel like we're kind of, kind of steering the ship in the same direction. Now, prices were coming down under Biden. There was a big spike because of COVID, which again, Trump horribly mishandled, and it cost the lives of, well over half of the dead that we experienced in this country. But, that was supply shock, wasn't financial, right? This is, it was very clear that this was not caused because of money printer go burr. Again, we lost somewhere in the order of $20 to $26 trillion in income and financial growth during that period of time, and some of it permanent because of people who died, who ran businesses, and those businesses went away. And we patched that hole with $6 trillion. That doesn't work. That's not money printer go burr. That's not fixing the hole with debt. As a matter of fact, we're still riding on the hole that was created by COVID. It's still there.
Right. Yeah.
So in this particular instance, they're blaming Biden for inflation that was caused by a material reality, in the same way that like the cost of wood goes up in an area hit by a hurricane because everybody's rebuilding their roof at the same time. That's what we went through. Trump raised national debt, the debt ceiling, $5 trillion in the big BS bill. That's money printer go burr. He's asking for $1 trillion for, did I say a billion or trillion in the $5 trillion. He's asking for $1 trillion for the military alone on a yearly basis, and is trying to get it passed through reconciliation, which has to lower the deficit. That's just how, like, they just don't know how anything works at all. Let's say, hold on, wait, we got
That's not how it works.
all right. So the point being is, maggots seem to be slowly but surely waking up at a pace that seems to be in line with some sort of a blue wave, if not a blue tsunami, this fall.
No, it's happening. It's happening very slowly, and I think sometimes, at least for me personally, I get very impatient about these things. It's like, okay, why is this happening so slowly? But I think at the end of the day, we got to take the wins where we get them. But I still think that the majority of his followers who aren't on board, especially now with inflation and gas, like, for fuck's sake, gas. I mean, come on, now. But like, the fact that they're still not on board, I truly believe that a lot of his base doesn't really understand how inflation works, or they're just straight up not paying attention, or they're in such rural areas that they're just not experiencing, I don't know, the same effect that we're experiencing, like living in a big city. I always will reference this when I used to work at, I won't say what company. I used to work at this company, and I used to do call screening for a couple right-wing shows, a couple right-wing podcasters. And this one time, this woman called in, and we were talking about climate change, for example. Not to pivot, it's related. We're talking about climate change, and she says, well, I know climate change isn't a thing and global warming isn't actually a thing because in New York, it's so hot because all the buildings and, all these
urban heat traps.
Urban heat, but it's still so cold and it's still snowing. And that, I was interning at this company at the time when that happened. I was 20. I was like, I can't believe what I'm hearing. Like, I've never, heard a hack like this. And that kind of made me realize, well, they're going to use that mentality with everything. They're going to find a way to, inflation it can't be his fault, even though he's in charge of it. It can't be his fault. It can't be his problem, even though there is undisputed evidence as to where he's allocating the money, why this is happening, et cetera, et cetera. They're just constantly going to come up with excuses, and it's going to keep happening no matter what. However, the trend and the numbers, they are, like you said, blue tsunami, at least a blue wave of some sort is going to happen in the fall. But we've already seen it. There's undisputed evidence that seats everywhere, smaller elections, local elections in every single, state that previously voted Trump. There are a ton of districts that are now turning blue. So we're seeing it happening. And that's the one upside to me having to pay $80 to fill my tank of gas, is that, the person next to me is having to pay $80 to fill up their tank of gas. And
it doesn't matter about And because of their political party, it's forcing them to confront a new reality. I think 100%. The rest of us, right? I said before all this nonsense started that there is an oil glut on the planet right now, and the drift in both the United States, Europe, and China is towards electric vehicles, and that there is we hit a peak of usage a long time ago, and if the oil companies and the oil derivative countries, the resource trapped countries like Saudi Arabia and others, if they had one last shot of just selling oil at a higher profit, a war would be worth it, even if it's a fake one, even if it's, it's a bunch of false flags and that kind of stuff. It would be the financial benefit is enormous for them, knowing that the end is in sight. And between Saudi Arabia with their Project 2030 and the UAE with their Project, I believe, 2040, and Kuwait and Bahrain and all these, like, we're going to have to do something because the world is leaving oil behind. It might not be in the next 5 years, but in the next 10 years, it's coming.
Going to happen. It's going to happen. Yeah,
exactly. And I think the interesting thing is that this strategy, gives with one and takes with two, because I've seen a bunch of articles recently about, like, EV drivers are chuckling, all the way to the bank as they drive past, the higher gas prices. And it's that demand shock that follows a situation like this, that Trump, beat his chest about. I got rid of all the green new scam stuff and all these, charging stations, and electric cars don't go very far, all that crap. And in reality, this is a great example of why we should be off oil, why our consumer cars should
Yes.
be, commuter cars should be
Yes.
off oil. And I think that's the
100%.
lesson that your average Gen Zer, if might feel about this.
Yeah,
Like,
totally. Well, this is why the Elon stuff was so devastating as well, because Teslas are the irony behind it is that Tesla, as a company, as a car company, was doing, at a point in time,
Mhm.
really cool things. They were on track to be one of the largest, electric car manufacturers, if not the largest in the United States. That was a fact that they were on track to do that. But of course, he had to go and nuke the chances of that happening anytime soon. People, selling their Teslas, people changing it for a Rivian, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. And I think the Elon effect too is it's going to take a couple years, I think, for that mentality and that predisposed, thought that people had about buying a Tesla that happened
Right.
because of, him and Doge and nuking the budget and everything. Is that it's going to take a little bit for that to also come back down, because it sucks. Like Tesla is a great car. People were buying Teslas, and there was, especially in California, a rise in electric vehicle usage. And I hope we get back to a point or another competitor
Right.
can come up and steal that monopoly back, because that electric vehicles is the way of the future. I think there
Yep.
should be a switch to that where possible.
Well, especially what, like, it's such a curious thing with the attacks on the Cybertruck, because it is a fully electric vehicle. So even though is the guy behind the wheel more than likely a Trumpy douchebag? Yeah. But he got tricked into buying an electric truck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to some degree, there are a bunch of people driving, electric F-150s as well, but they don't look any different than the other F-150s. But a lot of those folks view themselves as either conservative or Trump voters, but they're driving electric vehicles. That sales pitch never really went away. And I think the blowback from this circumstances is, especially with Trump talking about this, we should take the oil, to the winner goes the spoils, he said recently, that hits maggots, especially the ones that voted for no new wars, no regime change wars, no foreign wars, no forever wars, which, by the way, they mean religious ones. Their whole thing is step back, let everybody kill each other, and then we'll scoop up the spoils afterwards, because it will be so devastating. And what they mean is literally let the Palestinians and the Israelis kill themselves, and then let's just build, Trump Tower Gaza on the rubble. That's genuinely where they're going. So when I see a Cybertruck, as much as I might be annoyed that there's more than likely a Trump voter behind the wheel, the irony that person is driving a fully electric vehicle and is doing, more for the environment technically than the dude in his 1974 Pinto with Bernie and coexist bumper stickers all over it. It's ironic beyond measure, right?
It's so ironic, especially in California too. I think, like, obviously there are different parts of California where I'd say I call it purple areas, especially where I come from, where my parents live right now. I call it, quite a purple area. And the rise in cyber trucks I've seen in that area specifically has been insane. On my street alone in Los Angeles, a couple of my two different neighbors have bought cyber trucks recently, and in their front lawn they have like back the blue stickers and stuff like that. So it's just the most hilarious dichotomy. You're so right. And now I'm seeing all the bumper stickers that I bought this before Elon went crazy. Well, babe, Elon's been crazy. He's been crazy. So good on you for buying an electric vehicle, but it can just be for that reason alone.
I think there was a guy called Thunderfoot on YouTube. I don't see many of his stuff in my feed that much anymore, because I think it's been bumped out by the current unpleasantness. But he did a series of videos about how full of shit Elon Musk was, and how he was never really the genius everybody said. It was just trust fund money, just like
a figurehead. Yeah.
So one of the things that keeps popping up in a bunch of places is these Trump voters who are now saying, I'm just going to vote Democrat. Not even like I might not vote, but going all the way in that direction, which is, it's got to be shocking. And it's certainly why it ends up on a headline. And these are anecdotal, but this is usually the canary in the coal mine. If somebody's saying this outwardly when interviewed about it, that means there are a bunch of people who either not going to vote at all for Republicans who came out last time, or people who will at least pick and choose They're not
Right.
going to, they're going to vote against, if their representative was a stalwart supporter of Donald Trump and they run on this idea that I back the president and everything he wants to do, that might cost that person a vote now,
Mhm.
where it might not have before because that person always votes Republican. They'll leave it blank, like a lot of people did in the presidential election that cost, Kamala the White House.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. At least all the craziness that's been happening is contributing to this, is causing it, that people
Yes.
are actually actively trying to make a change. I do. I mean, especially in California, I do worry about some Republicans who are saying, "I'll just vote Democrat no matter what," especially in our government race, right? Or not our government race. Oh my gosh, our governor's race right now.
Yeah.
Because we have the possibility to have two Republican primary candidates unless something changes, especially with the recent Eric Swalwell stuff.
Mhm.
I just worry about people being like, "Oh, well, I saw a campaign for Tom Steyer, so I'm going to vote for Tom Steyer." It's like, well, maybe you should actually go and do some research about what the other options are here, because the two
Mhm.
Republican candidates are awful. So
Mhm.
that is my one concern, is that they'll just name recognition, vote for who they've seen on the Democrat side, and that could have some negative effects as well. Obviously, I've always been vote blue no matter who. That,
Mhm.
especially now, that is something that I
Mhm.
stand by. However, before we get to the primaries, before we get to the point where it's vote blue no matter who, we do have a choice to make, and we do have the ability to make our own
Agreed.
choices and choose who we want our candidate to be. So that's a concern I have, at least, is that we also need them to care to a certain extent. And that
Yeah.
a big reason why we're so divided right now, to the point where it's Democrat or Republican no matter what. But there are choices that need to be made beforehand. And I
Mhm.
don't know, that's something I've been upset about for a really long time, is that, of course, the minute I get to vote, it's this or that, this or that. There's no nuance. There's no,
Yeah.
picking people because of their policies, not just because of their party. And within our parties, that's something that we need to take into consideration as well. And that I hope that people who are changing their mentalities now, and they're gonna, cast their vote for the Democrats, I hope they have the hindsight to do their own research too, leading up to that decision.
Yeah, well, again, it's that old fall in love and fall in line,
Mhm.
idea of any primary, because what happens a lot of times though is, politics being the art of the possible.
Mhm.
That a lot of times, and especially if you want to stay within constitutional reality, unlike the Trump, because people, I think there's a lot of mythology about the Trump administration and what they're getting away with and what they're doing and what's
Mhm.
actually happening, that it seems like they're running roughshod over a lot of things when in reality they aren't. He's signing a bunch of executive orders. He's following the law where he has to, is finally threaded as John Hughes torture memos, and legal arguments for that they had in the, in the early 2000s about the Iraq war. He's just beating his chest, acting like a king, because he
Mhm.
thinks they sold this idea that to Republicans that, Obama was acting like a king. He was shoving this stuff down our throats, when in reality, it went through committee. It got,
Mhm.
it lost some of the wind in its sails because of the reality of the votes it needed to get and how committed it was, people were to making it happen. And so, Obama was very much a good functioning president.
Mhm.
And the fantasy utopian idea, I think, drives more regret on our side of the aisle than it certainly does on the other side of the aisle.
Mhm.
When our politician who means well, is trying to set up a program that will help people, like student loan relief and those kind of things, and it doesn't work out,
Yeah,
we tend to take it out more on the candidate and the person than the people who
totally.
blocked the vote or the people who
100%.
stopped it, right? And so in
Mhm.
the same, but maggots on the other side are the opposite. That, if you'll notice, when Biden was in office, it was Biden. Biden's doing this. Biden's letting all these people in. Biden's bringing in all
Mhm.
these murderers, and Biden's doing this. When Trump does something they don't like, it's the federal government can't be trusted. The federal government does this. This is the problem because the federal government, blah, blah, blah. The FBI is a corrupt organization.
Mhm.
The last two guys running it were Trump appointees, but they don't bring that up. They don't go, Kash Patel is hiding the evidence of the
Right.
Charlie Kirk murder. They go, the
Mhm.
FBI is. I just
Mhm.
showed that clip where Tucker Carlson said that. So
Yeah.
we tend to use those, the torture analogies, which I find particularly gross, like hold their feet to the fire and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Like, Cornel West was saying that about Obama 4 days after he got elected the first time.
Mhm.
in this particular instance, maggots weren't doing that at all. And
No.
and part of the reason why Trump sailed in was this idea of the myth that they can sit in. And so our choices aren't between buy all the bullshit and pretend nothing's wrong, and or criticize them to death for everything. Because it's politics and because it's a democracy and because there are people represented in this country that ain't us.
Mhm.
Democrats, because of a genuine broad diversity, have to take more things into account than Republicans do. I mean, at least up
Yeah.
till late. Obviously, maggots are
Mhm.
running for the hills right now, some of them
Yeah.
because of what they don't like. But for the most part, they've been able to bully their way past it. So the question is like how to get young voters to fall in love and then fall in line if they don't get
Yeah.
everything they want, because TYT, that's the methodology, and it's cost us multiple elections and multiple House seats, is this: if we don't get everything, nobody gets anything.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many reasons why I think Gen Z has kind of fallen behind in terms of getting with the program, on focusing on what's right and focusing on specific issues. And I think it's mainly because it sucks because there's always going to be the argument of, well, these people aren't representative of us or not representative of, how we grew up, our beliefs, et cetera, et cetera. But that's going to happen with every younger generation. That's just the way it works. And unfortunately, I think it's going to take a couple Gen Zers some time to realize that happens every single every single generation, that there's going to be an age gap and a gap in understanding with our politicians and the constituents, specifically Gen Z constituents. So, but that turn is happening. As my peers and I are getting older, I'm noticing there has been more of a switch. Unfortunately, when Kamala was running, the thing that really did it for her in terms of not coming through as a victor was Palestine and was Israel and the comments that she made about that. However, it sucks because that's been a huge Gen Z issue. More often than not, Gen Z voters, Palestine and Israel is one of the biggest issues right now to them. And I think earlier you asked me what I think is a story that's, we're not touching on, is with all the craziness that's been happening recently in the United States, with everything that's been happening with Iran, we're completely forgetting that younger voters care about that more than other issues that are happening in the US. Younger voters want the United States to change their opinion, turn a little bit, just not help Israel point blank, period. However, that's another issue where it's like, okay, well, we're in so deep. They've been an ally for years and years and years. That switch is not just going to happen because you want it to happen. And unfortunately, I don't want to say we're settling because that's not the right terminology, but for lack of better words, I think younger voters kind of need to realize that you have to pick in this situation, specifically with what has been happening with Palestine and Lebanon more recently. You have to pick the lesser of the two evils. You have to understand that Trump was going to be far worse for the situation than Kamala was, that the Republicans are going to be worse for the situation than the Democrats are. You kind of have to put aside that predisposed opinion that you have, and a lot of it is social media too. Especially, being younger, growing up with Instagram, at least for me personally, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff. From a young age, I was always taught or by my peers, kind of peer pressured into it of well, if you don't think this way, if you don't post this infographic, if you're not with us, you're against us, especially on social media. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean anything. I can repost an infographic and then not, do anything to actually help the situation that I'm reposting about.
Slacktivists.
And I think, unfortunately, what's been happening in Palestine has kind of fallen into that territory of, well, I'm reposting all of this on Instagram. I'm bringing attention to my 1,000 followers that I have on Instagram. They're going to see it. They're going to care. I'm helping the cause. And it's like, well, you're not, because ultimately you decided not to vote in the presidential election because you couldn't dare vote for Kamala because that would go against your infographic. You're doing the opposite of what would have helped. So
and it costs lives. It literally costs lives. It's and again, I've often said, and people know it well here, that if you're ever confronted with a choice that you believe is between the lesser of two evils, choose less evil. It's that simple. And in all honesty, the whole if you're not with us, you're against us thing is not something that was born out of it's been around for millennia.
Yeah.
any kind of tribalism that occurs. It's that young people aren't immune to it. As a matter of fact, the George W. Bush crowd around Iraq, pushed this narrative everywhere, which is, somewhere between if you're not with America, you're against America, and if we don't do this, the terrorists win. Is the mentality that you see on social media, absorbed by Gen Z and Gen Y. Ironically, it's not the mentality, quite frankly, of young adults of the past, even the hippie movement. It's more like the mentality of an eighth grader, where, if somebody tells me they hate war or they hate Israel and they hate Nickelback but their voice raises when they say Nickelback, I'm like, you're not in touch with what even hate means, and I don't buy it. I think most of this is performative, and the issue that we had is that beyond the Gen Y and Gen Z crowd that may have voted or with their feet in the last presidential election. The reality is that hundreds of thousands of voters in Michigan and other places, I can't believe they were that dumb that they thought Donald Trump would be better for this, for the Palestinians than Harris, who, again, would
Right.
not meet with Netanyahu in private while Donald Trump was meeting with Netanyahu in private. The idea that she would have started, after Trump posts that Trump Plaza Gaza video, that you would look at those two and go, well, she's clearly worse. Or if I vote for her, I'm doing terrible things in the world, when Donald Trump is clearly openly talking about ethnic cleansing the
100%.
entire
Yeah.
area. And so
Yeah.
I don't buy they were dumb and they missed it. I happen to think that there are a good portion of them that were like, I'm just over it. Let it happen.
Yeah. I think
Palestinians
that's
are going to
where,
lose.
yeah.
Fuck
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, I think that's the mentality where you just said, like, I'm over it. I think that's where a lot of Gen Z stand right now too, with everything that's been happening more recently. That's the sentiment I've seen everywhere. There's a sentiment I've seen on TikTok nonstop, Instagram, that they're just done, and which sucks because we're leading up into some really important elections here. We're leading up into the midterms, so they kind of need to get their stuff together. They need to get it together and realize that a lot of these issues that they've harped on for so long, it's bigger than us. It's bigger than our generation. We
Right.
need to kind of
again,
put those feelings aside.
What members of Gen Y and Gen Z are gonna come to that exact conclusion are the ones that are aging out of this mentality. There is a reason why younger voters, in a lot of circumstances, tend to be more idealistic about these things and then get more realistic with time. Not just because you get, disenchanted with reality, or you find out
Yeah.
the world is cruel or any of these other things, but you start recognizing that I think on two fronts. One is there are other people in the world that don't believe things you believe, and that you can think they were brought up in a cult and all that kind of stuff, and that if you were brought up in the same cult, you would still have the beliefs that you have, which if you go watch Jesus Camp or any of those things, or the FLDS documentaries, is clearly not true.
Of course, yeah.
That anybody who's sort of tortured by their circumstance and the limited view of the world, there's a reason those systems crank out cookie cutter human beings. And so, no, there are people who genuinely believe stuff that is in direct conflict with what you believe, and they're going to need it, and you could just recognize that. The other thing is that you have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility that we eventually wake up to convince those people otherwise.
Yeah.
That it's not just enough to yell at them and call them names, but if you look at them with the compassion of a Democrat and with the compassion of a true liberal, and go, if somebody was raised in a FLDS cult or Scientology or some Orthodox religious thing, and they kind of come out of it, maintaining their religious beliefs, but not completely ate up with the dumbass, as my dad would say, in it. That those people need time to kind of restructure their view of the world, and they will come to it over time if if there's someone there going, hey, I get why you don't think I'm on your side. I get it. I understand why you're afraid. It's not simple. It's an oversimplification to just call you evil. That's not what I'm doing here. And that's I think everybody wakes up to that at some point. I mean, there's still some people who have, are blue flamers or red flamers, all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody else is like, oh, okay, I see what they're pissed about. They just
Yeah.
need to be,
Yeah.
yeah. Go
No,
ahead.
that's
Sorry.
something that no, you're good. That a big problem I have with a lot of Democrats that I've been interacting with recently as well is the whole welcome committee thing. Is Republicans that are now changing their mind, that are now coming to the
Mm-hmm.
Democratic side, and like, well, I'm keeping you at an arm's distance. I don't fully trust you, and it's fair to have those opinions because of how damaging
Mm-hmm.
their vote was in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that's a big thing that's playing against us right now, is that we as a collective whole need to be more welcoming. I could decide
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow, oh, you know what, actually I think I'm a Republican. They wouldn't bat an eye, they wouldn't care, despite the
Right.
fact that the show that I work on right
They do
now,
it all the time. They
everything
do it
else, like they
all
don't
the time. Right.
they don't care, they don't have standards. So us, kind of having that purity ideology, the purity test, and being skeptical initially is what's going to end up nuking us too, if we as a collective whole
Mm-hmm.
kind of we need to be more accepting. And it sucks because I do think, to a certain extent, everyone has gotten hardened in the past couple of years. Everyone has become more inherently biased,
Jaded.
inherently
Yeah.
hateful, inherently jaded. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hateful is maybe a strong word, but
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, everyone's become jaded, and that's something that
Maybe just haters.
Haters, yeah. It's unfortunately, it's going to take time for that to change, and for people to kind of come down from that mentality right now. But that's where we are right now, and I
Right.
urge everyone to take a step back and kind of and take that into consideration too. That it's tough for these people who have been told all these lies and all these promises for the past 8 years essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just now coming to and realizing that everything they've believed for the last 8 to 10 years has been a lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. I have sympathy for these people. The main reason I have sympathy is because a friend of mine from back home, who now has a really big following, she is a liberal content creator. She was raised to be MAGA. She was raised in a conservative household. She went to
Right.
the private Catholic school down the street from my public high school. And I saw firsthand that change happen in her once she was able to move out of her house, once she went to college and
Mm-hmm.
was, started doing her own research. And now she's super successful and very well spoken, doing all these really cool things for the Democratic Party. But if the people who were initially, teaching her that weren't as welcoming initially, she would have never changed. She would have never had the career
Right.
that she has now. And that's like a prime example that I always think of, and why my mentality has always been to try to have a conversation, try to don't name call, don't stoop to their level. When they go low, we go high.
Mhm.
That's the mentality that I try to live by, and that I
Well,
want to urge
I
everyone
think
to live
what
by.
I
Yeah.
think what you're really pointing at is when they attempt to go high, let them.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
other thing is, just because they're going high on one particular issue doesn't mean you have to be all in on them. Tucker Carlson's a great example of this. Just because he's against the Iran war, the reality is he's against the Iran war because Iran is an ally of Russia, and so is Tucker Carlson. Not
Mhm.
because of the, so if he's going to be a voice against this, he let him be, because he's not
Exactly.
talking to
Yeah.
our side or our group
Mhm.
in any way. He's not drafting people in that direction. He's doing it to maggots or whatever. So it's none of our business in
100%.
that regard, and it has nothing to do with him
Totally.
finally waking up or any nonsense like this. It's just silly. But in the
Mhm.
meantime, there are the Joe Walshes of the world, or people who've come along eventually who've gone, okay, enough.
Yeah.
And again, even those people are not going to be, they're not going to be blue flamers. They're not going to be AOC or Bernie Sanders or something like that. They may never be, because of how they were brought up or what they believe. And by the way,
Totally.
some of their beliefs may still be genuine, not
Mhm.
hostile, anti-immigrant, whatever. They're just like, no, I don't think government programs can solve this problem, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
those are the people you have to legislate with. You have to figure
Mhm.
out a way to come to the table, and that's what democracy is all about. Those people are going to
Totally.
continue to exist. And
Yeah.
those are the people, by and large, that are going to show up when you are trying to work out a solution.
Mhm.
They're the subset of the subset of the subset of people that showed up to work on solving a problem, because they recognize the problem. They just may not recognize your solution. So your
Mhm.
responsibility then becomes, how do I convince them that my solution is the best way? And
Mhm.
fighting for it, in the analogy that everybody uses, I just find to be a bit silly, because you're
Yeah.
not really fighting at that point. You're like, no, look at these numbers. Look at the the budget. Look at these people. Look at this group of people who are being disenfranchised, and they're not all my people. A lot of them are yours. That are, people who will lose SNAP benefits if this happens. People will lose food if the farm bill doesn't have this provision in it. That's the reality of legislation, not the fucking Jim Jordan with his jacket off, trying to hide from his past. The vast majority of the government stuff that goes on, and the stuff I think that can be inspiring if you let it, is the work that does get done, especially when Democrats are in there. Which, is there a way for, and maybe this is the biggest question, is there a way for Gen Y and Gen Z to understand that the power of compromise is actually a superpower in these circumstances, and that getting anything passed that ends up helping people, like 25 million people who got health insurance through the passage of the ACA, is not a failure of Medicare for all, but a victory for support for people who actually made it there, and that the all or nothing approach is damaging, because that means you're willing to sacrifice anybody who doesn't make it. You're like, I don't care if 25 million people don't get insurance. We want everything or screw them. And I'm going to vote against this group that got 25 million people health insurance next time to show them that I want more.
Yeah, I think that's happening now, like especially with the turn of everyone. Everything is turning right now. We're seeing a massive shift, and especially with Gen Z, I'm seeing it happen firsthand, especially in California. I mentioned earlier the governor's race. That's another example, is that even before, like, okay, for example, when the Eric Swalwell stuff came out, before he dropped out of the race, just when the allegations first were surfacing and there was conversation happening online, immediately there was talk of, oh my gosh, well, he was the one with the biggest name recognition. He was the Democrat that we were going to back. What are we going to do now? And that was a firsthand example of we have to compromise. We have to, realize that there are other names in this race, other names that we're going to have to back, despite the fact that, this guy that we were initially going to back, obviously that's not a viable option now because of XYZ, obviously. And the way that switch happened so fast on social media was really impressive. I was very impressed by people I follow, by other Gen Z people talking about it immediately. That happened so quick. And I think people are starting to realize, wow, when we actually communicate and we actually take all of this into consideration, and when we allow nuance to be in the situation, then we see movement. Then we see people, adopting the same mentality for the betterment of our country, in this case, the betterment of our state. We're seeing it happen firsthand. And I weirdly think, at least in California, that was a really big thing that kind of opened up a lot of people's minds and was like, oh man, this guy that we thought was great is actually a terrible scumbag. Maybe that's a little a little rough, but
legally you can just go with alleged at this point, and we'll just leave it there. The point is that he doesn't need to be leading anything. And that's obviously true. Again, I like, there's so much about that puzzles me as a male with a decent TVQ and awareness point or whatever. I don't understand, and I'll never understand forcing yourself on a woman. But I've never been drunk, and I'm never going to be. But even still, sober or drunk, none of that makes any sense to me whatsoever. It's just so outside.
That's another thing that I think that we're forgetting. And again, you asked me at the beginning of this hour, like what are some things that are kind of getting swept under the rug?
Sure.
I think in the past couple of years, this country's inherent misogyny has really come out to play with every single election, with every single candidate who is a woman now and forever. We are going to have a second thought about if a Democratic, a female candidate can beat a Republican male candidate. That's always going to be a fear that's instilled in us because of the last couple elections, which absolutely sucks. Because the fact that there are people out there that genuinely believe that a woman can't do the job simply because they're a woman baffles me to this day. You're okay having women, a hateful woman on the Supreme Court of Justices, but you can't have a woman for president? What's up with that? But that is something
I'll tell you exactly what they think. And this is where this comes, especially the Republicans with this like trad wife shit that they've been pushing for a long time. This is not changed.
Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah, they've been pushing that stuff forever. Okay, because they believe it's a religious patriarchy. And by the way, it isn't. I know people love to play that it's a uniquely white male Christian thing. It is by no means. And as a matter of fact, it cost us a lot of voters of color specifically who came here, who again are now a subset of a subset of a subset. You have to understand that the people who've come to this country in the last 2 decades as immigrants that, can't come in under the wire and don't participate in our electorate, the ones who actually had enough money in certain countries to move here, to actually make the leap, who came here, even to have asylum claims, had tens of thousands of dollars to do it. They're not the same people who, they're not like Haitian refugees in a fucking rowboat or Cubans in on a coconut raft who, made it like Papillon. They're people who had enough money, were wealthy enough to pay the graft to get past the guard, pay the graft to get inside the country, pay to, everything cash for a long time. Those folks don't vote the same way as somebody who came here to end up in a job being a roofer. And we have this mentality in this country that the immigrants that have come here by and large over the last thing, and it has its own subtle racism, is that they all came over here to pick fruit and do roofing, and that's what immigrants do. And so, that it's a pitiable job done by pitiable people. And if those jobs go away, they're just going to, they're not of any value to us. So we got to make sure they're able to pick the fruit and do the jobs Americans don't want to do. That's the conversation that's happened for a long time. But in reality, the people that have come in the last couple of decades are well-to-do compared to the rest of their country. When Trump bitches about people from the Congo, he does it with full knowledge that the daughter of the head of the Congo bought multiple Trump properties, condos in his buildings for $7 million a piece. All money stolen from the Congolese people. Well, when that person becomes a naturalized citizen, they're not voting blue or ultra blue or liberal. They're voting from the position of an upper middle class or rich person in their country who came here to get richer, not to find the American dream, but to sit on top of the American dream while other people struggle to get it. That is a very distinctly different group of humans. And even with the coyote stuff that happened during COVID, the people that were coming into the country, had to pay a coyote multiple times, $5,000-$10,000. The average Hispanic person from South America, or Portuguese or Brazilian, or Guatemalan, comes across the border with that kind of money 3, 4, 5 times. Well, when those kind of folks get in or have family here, their family is going to vote for pulling up the ladder after them. That's the way they vote. And by and large, they're, Latin American Catholics are patriarchal, traditional family values people. They vote on abortion, all that kind of stuff. So it's this idea that somehow you can count on, it's ridiculous that Republicans have said that, Democrats are importing voters when it's exactly the opposite.
100%.
Yeah.
No, firsthand experience for me. My mom is 100% Latina. She is an immigrant from El Salvador. My mom's entire side of the family, they now, they all have legal citizenship. They all went through the proper channels, to be citizens of the United States. They are here, and it has taken so long to educate them on why a woman can be president, and other issues, especially like you mentioned with Catholicism. I was raised Catholic firsthand. I was raised, and was in school being taught all of these terrible things, all of that being homosexual is a sin, that aborting a child is a sin. I was taught that firsthand and was able to do my own research once I got older. And luckily, like, my parents never had that opinion. Obviously, they've always been very liberal, but the rest of my family, I can't really speak on. It took them having Gen Z kids who then grew up, who then adopted their own mentalities to teach them, there are other ways that things can be done. This because you were taught this in this country doesn't inherently mean that that's going to travel over, that that means the same thing now. But I see it firsthand how much like misogyny is at the basis of that, of at least my mom's culture, at least 50% of me, like, that culture. It sucks, but the tide has been turning. And there are changes happening, which I'm saying
I agree, which is why sort of the point I was making before I derailed myself about why it's okay to have a Republican woman in Congress or even on the SCOTUS, but not as president, because there is there is a material difference between those two seats. So on the Supreme Court, you sit amongst other people, so it's a coalition,
It's not just
discussion, right? as a representative of the House or the Senate, it's still limited in what you can do. You have to join with other people to do it. But being the
Right.
final arbiter, the decision maker, that's what makes me the decider. You know, that being that person, that's too much of a job for a woman. That's where they think that's where it still holds the religious base for them. And it's where orthodoxy and democracy run headlong into each other. They just can't allow for it. But in the last election, it wasn't, you know, I would argue that that the sex of the candidate had more effect than her skin color ultimately. But there was a big portion of like Africans who came to the United States who are now citizens who voted against her because they literally, from the point of view of, I left a country run by black people for a reason. Like I mean, think about what that mentality does to someone, or the idea that you would, I mean, like a racist, internalized racism of your own. But that was a statistically significant number of people. That's bizarre to us. But again, you're not talking about all the people from the Congo or all the people from, you know, I guess Sudan or any of those areas. You're talking about the ones that could get out, and the ones that could get out, you know, and pay some money, and the ones that could get out and pay a lot of money, and the ones who actually made it. As you narrow that down, it's reflective not of the general group of people, Guatemalans in general, Congolese people in general, Middle Eastern people in general, but a very specific subset who came here for a specific reason. And they're like Paul Ryan is this one standout for me, is where he wouldn't have gone to school if it wasn't for SSI. Social Security survivors benefits is what he paid for his college when his father died. And his whole time in Congress, he's been trying to pull the ladder up behind him.
Yeah, no,
Cut
and
other people
that's the irony with people like Erica Kirk right now. Oh my God, who's pushing again like this trad wife mentality that you need to stay home when it's the feminist movement that's running Turning Point USA.
Turd Polish USA. Yeah,
you can't push this mentality onto women who are in their 20s right now that they need to stay home, they need to drop out of college, that they need to do XYZ if they want to actually be considered conservative or a Republican, when you're doing the exact opposite. And it's the hypocrisy that really just makes me chuckle, and why I'm like, she's capitalizing on so, like, you know what, you go girl, make your money being a grifter, make your money being a liar, whatever. Oh my gosh, Erica Kirk is one of the most annoying people on the internet right now.
So yeah, and especially who you're taking the money from, because again, the weird part about Turning Points USA and you know, and the youth vote idea is that that's what TPUSA was built to do. It was built to deliver the youth vote to Republicans. And by and large, it was pretty successful. It drove a huge chunk of Gen Z and Gen Y voters towards the Republican Party over time, which again speaks to my idea that if you cultify someone, it doesn't matter which direction that cult goes, left or right. You know, they will either stay in it for the rest of their lives, or they will talk themselves out of it at some point. And or most of the time, it's a gray area. They will move 80% one direction. A lot of them just end up not voting because they were cultified, and anything outside the cult, while they may not be a part of it themselves, doesn't motivate them the way, you know, some sort of, I don't know, manna from heaven would. So they end up just being nihilistic and saying it's all fixed and watching conspiracy theory videos, which is the trap Erica Kirk finds herself in, because they also cultivated this paranoia that they didn't have any facts against Democrats about flooding people into the country to turn them into voters. There is no material reality there at all. More people voted for Trump twice in the villages than they found, undocumented people voting because they thought they could, because they were here on a green card instead of naturalized citizens, and all it, and they got confused or registered to vote and got, you know, the ability to do it in a primary or a local election. In the federal election, they were obviously found out. So that group, the Gen Y and Gen Z, there's a lot of youth vote that's fairly terrible these days. I mean, that's what Erica Kirk is. That's the money she's milking right now.
Yes. And they accomplished it. They accomplished it just by being on campuses. They accomplished it just by, you know, being there. But I do think Democrats can take something out of their page in terms of outreach, in terms of presence, in terms of getting on Gen Z's level and meeting them where they're at. You know, campaigning to them where they're at. there's a reason why I've only seen, again, to bring it back to the California governor's race, why I've only seen Tom Steyer ads, because he's campaigning on TikTok. He's campaigning on Instagram. I think more Democrats need to get with what Republicans have been on for years and meet Gen Z where they're at, on college campuses, at these events, doing things that they want to see, supporting podcasters that they want to listen to, supporting people who are obviously influential in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're right at the tail end of the show. Bella, thank you for coming on the show. We'll do this again very soon. But all ageism aside, I think that there are. I agree with Hillary Clinton in this, that I think there are a large group of people that are reachable, and then there's a basket of deplorables in any group, not just MAGA, but in any kind of hardline crowd of any sort, and those people will always be a subset of the public. And the more we can start to convince, we're never going to be able to take the Gen Z and the Gen Y TPUSA people and just whip them over one direction. But if the more they have to engage with the idea that we're not the enemy, we just disagree on policy, that there aren't partisan problems, they're just partisan solutions. And our solution seeks to make better their lives as well as our own, that it isn't just on one side. That's what maturation is. And a lot of times you'll find that Gen Y and Gen Z are coming around has a lot more to do with the fact that they're just aging out of the cult susceptibility.
For sure. Totally. Couldn't agree more.
Excellent. Thank you for being on. And we'll see you again real soon, I hope.
Of course,
if not here on Steph's show,
yes.
Much love. Appreciate it.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you so much, Hal. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Cheers. There she goes. Ladies and gentlemen, Bella from the Stephanie Miller Show coming on and giving us a perspective of the youngins, Yes, I may look young. I'm 1,000 years old, sir. I will see you guys this afternoon. We'll look at more of that Tucker thing, but also I think I'm going to mercifully cut up some of the Trump thing that he said this weekend, so we don't have to watch the whole damn thing, but just the pieces of it, because it's parts of it when he just gets on a tear is just so laborious and lame. But then on the other side of it, there's stuff that people need to see that they may have missed. That and be reminded, in much the way we were talking today, that he's doing so much damage to his own cause. That's the key. So anyways, I'm going to let you guys go. I will see you this afternoon. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. Don't forget, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland week after this one. Very exciting.
The screen glows bright with a crooked smile. Words spill out, all venom, no style. Promises made, they rot in the air. A handshake, a lie, a blank, cold stare. Puppets dance, the strings are tight. Shadows whisper in the dead of night. This is some bullshit.